The Galactic Council chamber was silent for the first time in many years. Thousands of lights glowed across the giant circular hall. Alien leaders from hundreds of worlds sat in floating seats high above the silver floor. Some were tall and thin with glowing skin. Some looked like giant insects. Others wore heavy metal armor that covered their entire bodies. At the center of the chamber stood Chancellor Voren, leader of the Galactic Council. Behind him floated a massive blue image of Earth. A small world. A weak world. A young world. At least, that was what everyone believed. The attack has already begun, Voren announced calmly. The Varex Empire expects full surrender from humanity within the next cycle. Many council members nodded with satisfaction. The Varex Empire was one of the strongest military powers in the galaxy. No civilization had ever survived a direct assault from them. Earth had no chance. One alien leader laughed softly. The humans barely joined the galactic network 20 years ago, he said. Their ships still use chemical fuel in some regions. Another smiled. They are emotional creatures. Divided by nations. Easy to break. The chamber filled with quiet agreement. Only one council member remained silent. Ambassador Lyra of the Tellurians watched the image of Earth carefully. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly. She had studied humans longer than most. And something about them worried her. They are unpredictable, Lyra said quietly. Several council members turned toward her. Voren gave a small smile. You believe these humans can resist the Varex Empire? Lyra paused for a moment. I believe, she said slowly, that attacking a species before understanding them is dangerous. Some members laughed openly now. The Varex commander standing near the center of the chamber crossed his arms proudly. Humanity will surrender before their second moon rises, he declared. Our fleets entered their system 3 hours ago. Earth's defenses are collapsing already. At that moment, warning alarms suddenly screamed across the chamber. Red lights flashed everywhere. The peaceful silver walls turned dark crimson. Council guards rushed forward instantly. What is happening? Voren demanded. A frightened officer ran into the chamber. Emergency arrival near the station, the officer shouted. A Varex warship just exited hyperspace. The commander frowned in confusion. That is impossible, he said. No ship was scheduled to return yet. Suddenly, the entire station shook violently. Several council members fell from their seats. Then came another impact. Boom. The giant doors at the far end of the chamber slowly opened. Smoke poured inside. Metal sparks flew through the air. Everyone stared in horror as a heavily damaged Varex warship appeared outside the station window. Its surface was burning. Half the ship was missing. The famous symbol of the Varex Empire had been ripped apart. The chamber became completely silent. How? The commander whispered. Moments later, emergency teams dragged several injured Varex soldiers into the hall. The soldiers looked terrified. Not angry. Not wounded. Terrified. One of them collapsed onto the floor, shaking badly. The Varex commander rushed toward him. Report, he ordered. What happened to your fleet? The injured soldier looked up slowly. His eyes were filled with fear. For several seconds, he could not speak. Then finally, in a broken voice, he whispered. We attacked Earth. The soldier's body trembled violently. And the humans followed us home. A cold silence spread through the chamber. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The Varex commander grabbed the soldier angrily. What are you saying? Human ships cannot match Varex technology. The soldier stared at him with empty eyes. They should not have been able to, he whispered. Chancellor Voren stepped forward carefully. Explain everything. The chamber lights dimmed as a damaged battlefield recording appeared in the air. The video began with Varex warships entering Earth's orbit. At first, everything looked normal. Human satellites exploded instantly. Several space stations were destroyed. Large cities below filled with panic. Council members nodded confidently. This is the end of humanity, one alien muttered. But then the recording changed. Human military ships began appearing from every direction. Not in organized formations. Not with perfect strategy. But with terrifying speed. Civilian cargo ships suddenly crashed directly into Varex destroyers. Mining stations exploded beside invasion fleets. Human pilots kept attacking even after heavy damage. One recording showed a human fighter missing half its wing. Yet it still rammed itself into a Varex cruiser. The chamber grew quieter with every second. These humans are insane, one council member whispered. The video continued. Earth's nations, once divided, suddenly united within hours. Old enemies fought side by side. Military factories activated across the planet. Entire cities transformed into defense zones overnight. Then came the worst part. The humans adapted. Fast. Too fast. Every Varex tactic worked only once. After that, humans changed immediately. They learned during battle. The recording showed human ships using captured Varex weapons against them only hours after first contact. That should not be possible, the Varex commander said weakly. Ambassador Lyra watched silently. The video suddenly became unstable. Warning alarms echoed through the recording. A terrified Varex officer appeared on screen. They are inside our systems, he shouted. Humans breached our network. Another explosion shook the camera. Then a final message appeared from a dying Varex captain. His face was covered in blood. We were wrong, he whispered. These creatures do not fear war. Static filled the screen. Then the captain spoke one final sentence. They were built for it. The recording ended. Complete silence filled the chamber again. No one laughed now. No one smiled. Suddenly, another officer ran into the hall. Emergency report, he shouted. Voren turned sharply. What now? The officer looked pale with fear. All Varex colonies near human space have gone dark. The Varex commander froze. What? No communications, the officer continued. No signals. No survivors detected. Several council members stood up in shock. That is impossible. The Varex border fleets were stationed there. How could humanity strike back this quickly? Before anyone could answer, the station lights flickered again. A deep warning sound echoed across the chamber. The officer looked down at his scanner. His hands began shaking. Unknown fleet detected, he whispered. Voren stepped forward slowly. Whose fleet? The officer swallowed hard. Then he looked up. Human. The entire Galactic Council froze in silence. Outside the station window, small lights slowly appeared in the darkness of space. One light. Then 10. Then hundreds. Human warships had arrived. The giant council station floated silently above the blue gas planet of Norelia. Inside the massive chamber, fear spread quickly. No one spoke after seeing the human fleet outside the station windows. The small lights in space slowly moved closer. Hundreds of human warships stood in perfect silence. Their ships looked very different from alien designs. Most galactic ships were smooth and beautiful. Human ships looked like weapons. Dark metal. Heavy armor. Sharp edges. Visible damage marks. Some ships were still burning from battle. Yet they kept moving forward. Chancellor Voren stared at the screens with growing fear. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. An officer checked the scanners. "More than 300 confirmed," he answered. "And more are appearing every minute." The Varex commander stepped forward angrily. "This is impossible," he snapped. "Humanity does not have fleets this large." Ambassador Lyra looked at him coldly. "Perhaps," she said softly, "the galaxy never looked carefully enough." Suddenly, every screen inside the chamber turned black. Then a single human face appeared. A man around 50 years old looked directly into the council chamber. His hair was gray. His face looked tired. But his eyes were calm and dangerous. "This is Admiral Elias Kane of the United Earth Defense Fleet," the man said. The chamber remained silent. Kane spoke slowly. "You attacked Earth without warning." Behind him, explosions flashed across dark space. "We did not start this war," Kane continued. "But humanity will finish it." The Varex commander laughed angrily. "You think humans can challenge the Empire?" Kane looked directly at him. "No," he answered calmly. "We already are." The transmission ended instantly. Silence returned again. Then warning alarms exploded across the station. "Emergency reports coming from the Varex border systems," an officer shouted. Large holograms appeared across the chamber. One by one, Varex military stations disappeared from the map. Destroyed. Another fleet lost contact. Then another. Then another. The council watched in disbelief. "How are humans moving this fast?" one alien leader whispered. "They are attacking supply routes," Lyra answered quietly. Several council members turned toward her. "They are not fighting like the galaxy fights," she explained. "Humans are cutting the Empire apart piece by piece." The Varex commander slammed his fist onto a control table. "Cowards," he shouted. "They avoid direct battle." But another officer interrupted him immediately. "No, Commander," the officer said nervously. "That is the problem." The chamber lights changed again. New battle footage appeared. This time, the council watched human attacks across multiple star systems. A Varex fleet entered an abandoned mining station. Seconds later, hidden human bombs exploded inside the tunnels. Entire warships vanished in fire. Another recording showed human soldiers hiding inside destroyed ships for days before attacking from inside enemy hangars. Then came something even worse. Human hackers broke into Varex military systems. Missile defenses suddenly turned against their own ships. Communication networks collapsed. Fleet commanders lost control. Chaos spread everywhere. The council members looked horrified. "These tactics are forbidden," one alien said. "Humans do not follow galactic war codes," another whispered. Ambassador Lyra folded her hands quietly. "Humans evolved on a violent world," she said. "To them, survival matters more than rules." Meanwhile, deep inside Earth's solar system, humanity prepared for total war. For the first time in history, Earth stood united. Old borders no longer mattered. Old enemies fought together. Across every continent, factories worked day and night. Civilian ships became warships. Mining lasers became weapons. Even damaged cities continued building defenses. Humanity moved with terrifying speed. Inside a massive underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Elias Kane stood before hundreds of military officers. Large battle maps covered the walls. Red enemy symbols filled nearby star systems. A young officer looked worried. "Sir," she said carefully, "the Varex Empire still outnumbers us." Kane nodded slowly. Yes, he answered. Another officer spoke nervously. Then how do we win? Kane stared at the holographic map. Then he gave a small smile. We make them afraid, he said. The room became silent. Kane pointed toward enemy supply routes. Alien empires fight for victory, he explained. Humans fight for survival. His finger moved across the map again. And there is a difference. Far away, inside Varex territory, fear had already begun spreading. Entire military stations stopped responding. Convoys disappeared without warning. Human attacks came from everywhere. And nowhere. No one understood how humans kept appearing behind enemy lines. Soon, strange stories began spreading through the galaxy. Stories about human soldiers surviving impossible injuries. Stories about trapped humans fighting for days without food. Stories about human pilots crashing damaged ships directly into enemy fleets. Alien civilians began giving humans a new name. The Silent Predators. Back inside the council chamber, panic slowly replaced confidence. Council members argued loudly now. We must stop this war. Humanity is unstable. The Varex Empire caused this disaster. The Varex commander turned furiously toward Chancellor Voren. The council must support the Empire. Voren looked uncertain for the first time in many years. Support you? Lyra asked quietly. She pointed toward the battle reports. You attacked a young species without understanding them. The commander growled angrily. They are dangerous. Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, she answered. That is now very clear. Suddenly, another emergency signal interrupted the chamber. A damaged Varex admiral appeared on screen. Smoke filled his command bridge. Explosions sounded behind him. Council, the admiral said weakly. Human forces breached the coral gate. The chamber gasped. That gate protected the main path into Varex territory. It had never fallen before. How many human ships? Voren asked. The admiral looked shaken. Only 30. Confused whispers spread across the chamber. 30. That is impossible. The admiral swallowed hard. They used asteroids as shields, he whispered. Then they crashed 2 of their own ships into the defense grid. Even the Varex commander looked stunned. They sacrificed their own vessels. The admiral's face turned pale. They sacrificed themselves willingly. Suddenly, loud explosions shook the admiral's screen. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. The admiral looked behind him in terror. They're here, he whispered. Gunfire echoed across the bridge. Then the transmission ended. The chamber fell silent once again. No one moved. No one spoke. At that moment, Chancellor Voren finally understood the terrible truth. Humanity was not fighting like a normal civilization. They were fighting like a species that refused to die. And that made them far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Outside the council station windows, the human fleet remained motionless in the darkness. Waiting. Watching. Preparing for whatever came next. Fear spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every day, new reports arrived from the war zones. Varex fleets disappeared without warning. Military stations exploded from hidden attacks. Entire supply routes collapsed in only a few hours. The powerful Varex Empire, once feared by everyone, was slowly falling apart. And the worst part was simple. Nobody understood humanity. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, emergency meetings continued day and night. Alien leaders argued constantly. Some demanded peace with Earth. Others wanted to destroy humanity before it became stronger. But Chancellor Voren wanted answers first. He stood near the center of the chamber, watching battle maps filled with red warning symbols. Then he turned toward Ambassador Lyra. "You studied humans before first contact," he said. "Tell us the truth." Lyra remained silent for several seconds. Finally, she spoke softly. "The galaxy made one terrible mistake." The chamber became quiet. "We believed humans were weak because their technology was young," she continued. "But we never studied the world that created them." Several council members looked confused. "What does their world matter?" one asked. Lyra activated a hologram of Earth. A blue planet appeared above the chamber floor. "It matters because Earth is one of the deadliest inhabited planets ever discovered." Shock spread across the room. "That cannot be true," another council member said quickly. "Humans are carbon-based mammals. Their species should not survive extreme environments." Lyra looked directly at him. "And yet they did." The image zoomed closer toward Earth. Massive oceans appeared. Violent storms moved across entire continents. Frozen wastelands covered the poles. Volcanoes erupted across islands. Predators hunted through forests and oceans. "Earth has unstable weather," Lyra explained. "Powerful gravity. Dangerous wildlife. Deadly diseases. Natural disasters." The chamber remained silent. "Most intelligent species evolved on safe worlds," Lyra continued. "Humans evolved in chaos." Several scientists in the chamber began reading the new data. One suddenly looked horrified. "This cannot be correct," he whispered. Voren turned toward him. "What did you find?" The scientist swallowed nervously. "Human bones are nearly twice as dense as standard galactic species." Another scientist interrupted immediately. "Their muscles are stronger too. And their immune systems are extremely aggressive," another added. The chamber slowly filled with nervous whispers. Lyra nodded quietly. "Humans survived because they adapted constantly," she said. "War, famine, disease, disasters, they endured all of it for thousands of years." The Varex commander crossed his arms angrily. "That still does not explain their military success." Lyra looked at him calmly. "It explains everything." At that moment, another officer entered the chamber quickly. "New intelligence report from Earth," he announced. The lights dimmed as hidden human records appeared on the giant screens. The council watched carefully. Ancient human wars. Massive destruction. Cities destroyed and rebuilt again. Weapons becoming stronger century after century. The alien leaders stared in shock. "Humans fought each other this often," one whispered. "For most of their history," Lyra answered. The chamber became colder. One recording showed humans continuing battle during terrible weather. Another showed soldiers surviving in frozen wastelands. Another showed humans rebuilding entire cities only years after destruction. The council slowly understood something terrifying. Humanity had spent thousands of years preparing itself for survival without realizing it. Then the recordings changed again. This time, secret military projects appeared. Deep underground bases. Hidden space stations. Massive shipyards buried beneath oceans and mountains. Voren frowned. These projects were never shared with the council. "They were hidden," Lyra answered quietly. The Varex commander stepped closer to the screen. "What is Project Aegis?" An officer checked the files. His face turned pale immediately. "It appears to be a classified planetary defense system." The chamber suddenly became silent again. "How large?" Voren asked carefully. The officer looked up slowly. "Extremely large." Far away from the council station, inside Earth's solar system, hidden machines slowly awakened in darkness. Deep beneath the moon's surface, giant doors opened for the first time in decades. Dust-covered ancient warships sleeping inside enormous underground hangars. Thousands of lights turned on one by one. Human engineers moved quickly through the massive tunnels. Sirens echoed across the moon base. Inside the command center, Admiral Elias Kane watched the activation screens carefully. A young officer stood beside him. "Sir," she said quietly, "the old fleet is responding." Kane nodded slowly. "How many ships?" The officer checked the numbers. "Over 4,000. Even she sounded shocked while saying it. Massive human warships slowly rose from hidden chambers beneath the moon. Unlike normal human fleets, these vessels were enormous. Heavy weapons covered their dark metal hulls. These ships had been built secretly for generations. For a war humanity hoped would never happen. Kane stared silently at the rising fleet. Then he spoke quietly. "My grandfather helped build these ships." The officer looked surprised. "He knew aliens existed?" Kane shook his head. "No. He watched the giant ships move into space. He simply believed humanity should always be ready." Meanwhile, back inside the Galactic Council chamber, fear continued growing. The hidden human fleet appeared on every screen. Council members stared in disbelief. They built this in secret. For how long? How did we not see this? Ambassador Lyra answered softly. Because humans learned long ago that survival depends on preparation. The Varex commander slammed his fist onto the table again. "Then we destroy them now," he shouted. But his voice no longer sounded confident. Suddenly, another emergency report arrived. Human fleets have entered 3 additional Varex systems. Large battle maps flashed red again. The Empire was losing territory quickly. Worse, many conquered alien species were now helping humanity. Slave worlds were rebelling. Prison camps were opening. The Varex Empire was beginning to break apart from the inside. Vorin looked exhausted. "This war is becoming uncontrollable." "No," Lyra said quietly. Everyone turned toward her. It was uncontrollable the moment Earth was attacked. The chamber became silent once more. Far away, inside the darkness between stars, the newly awakened human fleet moved forward together. Thousands of engines burned bright blue across space. Admiral Kane stood alone on the bridge of Earth's largest warship. The Iron Resolve. A communication officer looked toward him nervously. "Sir, the Council is requesting negotiations." Kane remained silent for several seconds. Then he gave a cold answer. "They had a chance for peace before they attacked our home." Outside the bridge windows, endless human warships continued moving deeper into enemy territory. For the first time in galactic history, the stars themselves seemed afraid. Because humanity was no longer hiding. The war was no longer near Earth. Now it had spread across the galaxy. Every major star system watched the conflict with fear. News channels showed burning fleets, destroyed stations, and human warships moving deeper into Varex territory every single day. The powerful Varex Empire was losing. And nobody could stop it. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, panic continued growing. Large holograms filled the room with red warning signs. More worlds had joined humanity. More Varex colonies had fallen. Even worse, entire alien populations were now rebelling against the Empire. Chancellor Vorin looked tired as he studied the newest reports. "How many systems have we lost?" he asked quietly. An officer checked the numbers. 27 confirmed, Chancellor. The chamber filled with nervous whispers. The Varex commander stood near the center of the room. His proud expression was gone now. Dark circles covered his eyes from exhaustion. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No species rises this quickly." Ambassador Lyra looked toward the battle maps. Humans are not fighting for power, she said softly. The commander turned toward her angrily. Then what are they fighting for? Lyra answered immediately. To make sure nobody attacks Earth again. Far away, inside occupied Varex territory, another battle had already begun. A giant prison world floated near a dying red star. Millions of alien slaves lived there under Varex control. Heavy chains covered the factories. Armed guards watched every movement. For years, nobody escaped. Until the humans arrived. Warning sirens screamed across the prison world as explosions shook the outer defenses. Varex soldiers rushed through the streets. Then human drop ships broke through the clouds. Dark armored soldiers landed across the prison camps. The slaves watched in shock as humans attacked the guards without fear. One Varex officer shouted orders desperately. Hold the gates. Do not let them inside. But it was already too late. Human soldiers blasted open the prison walls. Thousands of prisoners stared in disbelief. A tall human commander removed his helmet slowly. You're free now, he said simply. The prisoners could barely understand the words. Nobody had ever come back for them before. Across the galaxy, similar attacks happened everywhere. But humans did something strange after every victory. They did not conquer worlds. They did not steal resources. They freed prisoners. Destroyed slave camps. And left. Soon, stories about humanity spread through every star system. Some called humans monsters. Others called them saviors. Inside hidden stations and crowded cities, more alien species secretly joined Earth's side. The Varex Empire began collapsing from the inside. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship Iron Resolve, Admiral Elias Kane studied new battle reports carefully. The bridge was silent except for the sound of machines. A young officer stepped toward him. Sir, another slave colony has joined our alliance. Kane nodded slowly. How many now? 43 worlds. Even the officer sounded surprised. Kane looked toward the stars outside the bridge windows. This war was never only about Earth, he said quietly. At that moment, warning alarms echoed across the ship. Emergency transmission from Council space. Large holograms appeared instantly. Chancellor Voren's face filled the screen. He looked more nervous than ever before. Admiral Kane, Voren said carefully, the situation is getting worse. Kane remained calm. For the Empire, he answered. Voren ignored the comment. Our intelligence discovered something dangerous. The screen changed. A massive hidden structure appeared deep inside Varex territory. Even Kane's officers looked shocked. The structure was enormous. A weapon larger than a moon. What is it? Kane asked quietly. Voren hesitated for a moment. The Varex call it the Sun Hammer. Silence filled the bridge. It is a planetary weapon, Voren continued. Strong enough to destroy an entire world. Several human officers cursed quietly. Kane's face became cold. How long until activation? Voren looked down. Less than 2 days. Another hologram appeared beside the weapon. Earth. The target was Earth. The bridge fell silent instantly. One officer spoke carefully. Sir, if that weapon fires. Kane interrupted him. I know. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Kane turned toward the fleet commanders. Prepare the assault fleets. The officers looked surprised. Direct attack, one asked. Kane nodded once. We end this now. Far away, deep inside Varex territory, the Empire prepared for its final defense. Thousands of warships surrounded the giant weapon. The Varex Emperor himself stood inside the command fortress watching the battle maps. Unlike his commanders, he was calm. An advisor stepped toward him nervously. "Your Majesty, human fleets continue advancing." The Emperor nodded slowly. "They are predictable." The advisor looked confused. "Predictable? They protect others," the Emperor answered coldly. "That weakness will destroy them." The advisor hesitated. But why attack Earth in the first place? For the first time, the Emperor became silent. Then he looked toward the hologram of Earth. "Because humanity grows too fast," he said quietly. The advisor frowned. "They are still young." "Yes," the Emperor answered. "And already dangerous." He stepped closer to the map. "Humans learn faster than any species we have ever seen. Give them enough time, and no empire in the galaxy will survive." Back aboard the Iron Resolve, the human fleets prepared for war. Thousands of ships moved together through deep space. Weapons charged. Engines burned bright blue. Inside the command room, officers watched the enemy defenses carefully. One young officer looked nervous. "Sir," she said quietly, "the odds are against us." Kane looked toward the giant enemy fleet. "Yes," he answered calmly. "Then why attack directly?" Kane remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke softly. "Because if we fail, Earth dies." The room became quiet again. No one argued after that. Outside the massive bridge windows, endless stars filled the darkness. Human warships moved forward like a storm. The final battle was coming. And across the galaxy, billions watched in fear. Because everyone now understood the truth. Humanity would never stop fighting while Earth still stood. The final battle began in complete silence. Far beyond the Galactic Council station, thousands of warships faced each other across the darkness of space. On one side stood the Varex Empire. Massive black warships filled the stars around the giant sun hammer weapon. Endless defense platforms floated around the fortress like sharp metal walls. On the other side stood humanity and its allies. Human fleets formed long attack lines beside ships from dozens of liberated worlds. For the first time in galactic history, so many races stood together against the Empire. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, every leader watched the battle live. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even Chancellor Voren looked tense as the giant holographic battlefield glowed above the chamber floor. Ambassador Lyra stood quietly beside him. "The galaxy will change today," she whispered. Far away, aboard the human flagship Iron Resolve, Admiral Elias Kane stared toward the enemy fortress. The enormous sun hammer floated ahead like a dark moon. One shot from that weapon could destroy Earth forever. A communication officer looked nervous. "Enemy fleets are powering weapons, sir." Kane nodded calmly. "All fleets advance." The order spread instantly across human ships. Thousands of engines burned bright blue. The battle had begun. Suddenly, the darkness exploded into light. Varex cannons fired first. Massive beams of energy tore across space. Several Allied ships vanished instantly. Explosions filled the battlefield. But the human fleets did not stop. They kept moving forward directly into enemy fire. Inside the council chamber, shocked whispers spread quickly. "They are charging straight at the defense line. That is suicide." But Admiral Kane remained calm. "Phase 2, he ordered quietly. Moments later, giant metal containers suddenly launched from human ships. The Varex commanders looked confused. Then the containers exploded open. Thousands of asteroids poured into the battlefield. Human fleets hid behind the moving rocks as enemy cannons fired wildly. The Varex defense system struggled to target them. "They are using the asteroid field as cover," a council officer shouted. The Varex commander watching from the chamber looked furious. "Impossible," he growled. "No fleet would risk flying through that debris." But humans did. Human ships moved through the deadly asteroid storm at full speed. Some crashed. Some exploded. Yet the survivors continued forward. Inside the Iron Resolve, warning alarms echoed everywhere. Multiple hull breaches. 3 ships destroyed. Enemy interceptors approaching. Kane remained completely calm. "Keep moving." Outside the bridge windows, burning ships drifted through space. Human pilots continued attacking even while heavily damaged. One fighter lost both engines but still crashed directly into a Varex cruiser. Another human ship used its final power to protect Allied vessels from enemy fire. The alien fleets watching nearby became terrified. No species fought like this. No species sacrificed itself so willingly. Inside the council chamber, silence slowly replaced fear. The alien leaders watched the humans with disbelief. "These people should be retreating," one whispered. But they never did. Then came the second shock. Human boarding ships suddenly broke through the defense lines. Small armored vessels crashed directly into the enemy fortress surrounding the Sunhammer. Varex soldiers rushed through the corridors preparing defenses. Then human soldiers entered the station. Gunfire exploded across the giant structure. Inside narrow metal halls, brutal fighting began room by room. The humans kept advancing no matter the losses. Back inside the Iron Resolve, an officer looked toward Kane urgently. "Sir, boarding teams are suffering heavy casualties." Kane stared at the fortress screens. "Do they still move forward?" The officer checked the reports. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." Kane gave only one answer. Then the mission continues. Far away, deep inside the enemy fortress, human soldiers fought through endless waves of Varex guards. Explosions shook the corridors. Smoke filled the air. Still they moved forward. One wounded human soldier dragged himself across the floor just to open a security door for his team. Another protected injured allies while enemy fire tore through his armor. The Varex defenders slowly began retreating. Not because humans were stronger. Because humans would not stop. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, fear spread again. The alien leaders realized something horrifying. Humanity was ready to lose everything if it meant protecting Earth. And that made them unstoppable. Suddenly, another emergency alert appeared. Enemy defense grid collapsing. The hologram showed large sections of the fortress losing power. Human fleets immediately pushed deeper into the battle. Now Allied alien ships followed behind them. For the first time, the Varex Empire began losing control completely. Inside the central command chamber of the Sunhammer, the Varex Emperor watched the disaster unfold. His advisors shouted desperately around him. Outer defenses breached. Human forces entering the core sectors. Fleet command requesting retreat orders. But the Emperor stood perfectly still. Then the main doors exploded open. Human soldiers rushed inside. At the center of them stood Admiral Elias Kane. Smoke covered his dark armor. Small burns marked his face. But his eyes remained cold. The Emperor stared at him silently. "So," the Emperor said slowly, "humanity finally reaches my throne." Kane stepped forward. "You attacked our home." The Emperor gave a small laugh. "I attacked a future threat." He pointed toward the battle outside. "Your species grows too quickly. Too violently. The galaxy will fear you forever." Kane looked directly into his eyes. "Maybe, he answered quietly. Then his voice became harder. But today. He slowly raised his weapon. You lose. Suddenly, human forces destroyed the final control systems of the Sun Hammer. Warning alarms screamed across the fortress. The giant weapon began shutting down. Outside, Varex fleet started breaking apart in panic. Some tried escaping. Others surrendered. The impossible had happened. The Empire had lost. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, complete silence filled the air. No one celebrated. No one moved. The alien leaders simply stared at the battlefield in frozen disbelief. The strongest empire in the galaxy had fallen. And humanity had done it. Slowly, Chancellor Voren looked toward Ambassador Lyra. You warned us, he whispered. Lyra kept watching the human fleets drifting through the burning battlefield. Yes, she answered softly. But nobody listened. Outside the station windows, human warships remained in the darkness like silent predators. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The war was over. But the galaxy was still afraid. Burning wreckage floated silently across the battlefield near the destroyed Sun Hammer fortress. Broken ships drifted through space like ghosts. The mighty Varex Empire had fallen. And humanity stood at the center of it all. Across hundreds of star systems, billions of beings watched the final battle recordings again and again. They watched human ships charge directly into enemy fire. They watched wounded soldiers continue fighting. They watched an entire species refuse to surrender. Now the galaxy understood one terrifying truth. Humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, silence filled the massive hall once again. But this silence was different. Before, the Council had looked down on humanity. Now they feared it. Chancellor Voren stood near the center platform, staring at the newest reports. Final numbers, he asked quietly. An officer stepped forward nervously. The Varex Emperor is dead. Remaining fleets are surrendering across multiple systems. The chamber remained quiet. Another officer continued. Slave worlds are declaring independence. Human fleets are helping stabilize the region. Several council members looked confused. Helping, one asked carefully. The officer nodded. Yes. Human forces are delivering supplies, medical aid, and evacuation support. More whispers spread across the chamber. The alien leaders did not understand. Humanity had won the war. Why were they not conquering worlds? Why were they helping others? Ambassador Lyra folded her arms calmly. Because humans know suffering, she said softly. At that moment, the giant chamber doors slowly opened. Council guards stepped aside immediately. Admiral Elias Kane entered the hall. The entire chamber became completely silent. For the first time in galactic history, every alien leader stood up together. Not from respect. From fear. Kane walked slowly across the silver floor. His dark military coat still carried burn marks from battle. His face looked tired. But his eyes remained calm and steady. Several guards tightened their grip on their weapons as he approached. Kane noticed. He simply ignored them. Finally, he stopped before Chancellor Voren. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then Voren gave a slow nod. The war is over, he said carefully. Kane looked around the chamber. That depends on what happens next. The tension inside the hall became heavy. One council member finally stood up angrily. You humans destroyed half the empire. Another shouted from across the chamber. You turned the galaxy into chaos. Kane listened quietly. Then he answered calmly. We defended ourselves. The chamber fell silent again. The angry council member stepped forward. "You could take control now," he said carefully. "Nobody could stop you." Many leaders looked nervous after hearing those words. Because everyone knew it was true. Humanity had become the strongest military power in known space. Kane looked around the chamber slowly. Then he gave an answer nobody expected. "Earth does not want your worlds." Confused whispers spread everywhere. Kane continued speaking. "Humans are tired of war. We did not cross the stars searching for enemies." He pointed toward the battle map still glowing across the chamber. "You attacked us first." No one argued. Because no one could. The entire galaxy had watched the Varex Empire begin the war. Kane's voice became colder. "But understand this clearly." The chamber grew completely silent. "If anyone threatens Earth again." He paused for several seconds. "We will finish what they start." A cold feeling spread through every council member in the room. Even the guards looked nervous now. Because nobody doubted him anymore. Chancellor Voren spoke carefully. "What does humanity want now?" Kane answered immediately. "Peace." Several council members looked shocked. "Peace," one repeated. Kane nodded slowly. "Trade. Alliances. Cooperation." Then his expression hardened slightly. But never weakness. Ambassador Lyra watched him quietly. For the first time since the war began, she smiled faintly. Because she finally understood humanity completely. Humans could be kind. Humans could protect others. But if pushed too far, humans became terrifying. Days later, the Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as a major galactic power. New treaties were signed across dozens of systems. Former slave worlds joined humanity willingly. Trade routes reopened. The war slowly came to an end. But stories about humans spread even faster. Alien parents warned their children about Earth. Military schools studied human battle tactics. Commanders across the galaxy changed their entire defense systems because of what humanity had done. Soon, one sentence became famous across known space. "Never attack Earth." Meanwhile, back inside Earth's solar system, celebrations filled every major city. For the first time in history, humanity stood united. Old enemies shook hands. Soldiers returned home. The people of Earth finally believed they had survived the worst. But Admiral Kane was not celebrating. High above Earth, aboard the Iron Resolve, he stood alone on the bridge looking into deep space. A young officer approached carefully. "Sir," she said softly, "the Council accepted all peace terms." Kane nodded without turning around. "That's good." The officer hesitated. "You still seem worried." For several seconds, Kane remained silent. Then he looked toward the distant stars. Because this war was too loud. The officer looked confused. "Sir." Kane pointed toward deep space. "Every battle. Every explosion. Every signal." His face became serious. "The entire galaxy heard us." At that moment, a scanner suddenly beeped loudly. The officer checked the screen. Then her face turned pale. "Unknown transmission detected," she whispered. Kane turned immediately. "Source." The officer swallowed nervously. "Outside known galactic space." The bridge became silent. Then another screen activated automatically. A strange signal appeared. Ancient. Massive. Unknown. One message slowly translated into human language. "We have found you." Cold silence filled the bridge. Far beyond the galaxy, hidden in the darkness between distant stars, enormous machines slowly awakened. Their red lights burned like eyes in the void. And for the first time since the war ended, humanity was no longer the hunter. Something else was coming.